My name is Mary Rood. I had the privilege of serving this congregation as Director of Music from 2002 to 2006. And despite what some of you are so nicely doing by welcoming me back, my family and I attend at least once or twice a month. So we kind of blend in now, and that's a nice thing. Would you rise in body or spirit as you are able and join us in singing "We Are One"?
Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Atlanta, a beloved community that changes lives. I'm Darvis White, and I'm so glad you're here this morning. Wherever you're from, whomever you love, you are welcome here. If this is your first time, or if you've not yet had a chance, please stop by our Welcome Center in the social hall after the service to allow us to get to know you a little better. You can sign up to receive information about services and programs being presented over the next several weeks. As always, all visitors are invited to join our weekly Inquirers class, where you can learn more about our UU movement, our faith, and our congregation. This week, the Inquirers topic is worship in the liturgical year. The Inquirers will meet in room 1, just off the social hall, right after service today. Also, at 12:30 p.m., right here in the sanctuary, join Dr. Jason Delaney as he offers part 3 of his series, Worthy Beyond Worth. This 5-part workshop aims to improve the way we think about, talk about, and work with money in our communities and our lives, as well as to transform all our daily work into spiritual practice. Please note that attendance at previous sessions is not a requirement for participation. We hope you'll plan to take advantage of all that our religious education program has to offer. Is there something behind me? Do you see it too? It's new. This beautiful curtain has been brought to you by Ted Minersman and Sally Yerger, and we are so grateful to them for sharing their gifts and talents of handiwork and craftsmanship with us. And now, please be sure to take this moment to put your cell phone in its most reverent position. Thank you. Once again, we're glad you're here on this beautiful fall morning. Say the childless mighty word with me in order of service.
peace. The light of our chalice flame also represents the warmth of community. Won't you please take a minute to turn to your neighbor, someone you don't know yet, and welcome them into this holy space this morning.
Whatever that is. Yeah.
This combination of being kind and being strong, and I think that's a very rare combination.
While Sunday morning was often considered the most segregated hour in the week, Thurman helped pioneer a church where people of different races and religions could worship together.
He's suspicious of denomination and dogma and creed. He would never identify himself as a theologian because he thought theologian.
Because he believed
Actually practicing contemplative spirituality before we actually started calling it contemplative spirituality.
At his heart, he was a nature mystic.
Thurman is talking to trees. Trees!
Yet this mystic was also an outspoken critic of Christianity for its part in the nation's deep racial divides, and he countered with a shocking new work that offered a revolutionary new way of understanding the life of Jesus Christ and how it speaks directly to the oppressed and disinherited.
I carry the book with me, Jesus and the Disinherited, every day.
And he gives an Africanity to the interpretation of Jesus.
He provided a spiritual perspective that was empowering.
There were people encountering Thurman's work and being shaken at their core.
I would have to find out what was the word that the religion of Jesus had to say to the man with his back against the wall.
Every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, I will pray. Yes, every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, I will pray.
Upon the mountain, my Lord spoke, out of his mouth came fire and smoke. Looked all around me, it looked so fine, till I asked my
every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, I will pray.
Jordan River is chilly and cold. It chills the body, but not the soul. There ain't but one train upon this track. It runs to heaven and right back.
Every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, I will pray. Yes, every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, I will pray. Every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, I will pray. Yes, every time I feel the Spirit in my heart, moving in my heart,
Our reading this morning comes from Howard Thurman, found in his book, The Inward Journey. Keep fresh before me the moments of my high resolve. Despite the dullness and barrenness of the days that pass, if I search with due diligence, I can find a deposit left by some former radiance. But I had forgotten. At the time, it was full-orbed, glorious, and resplendent. I was sure that I would never forget. In the moment of its fullness, I was sure that it would illumine my path for the rest of my journey. I had forgotten how easy it is to forget. There was no intent to betray what seemed so sure at the time. My response was whole, clean, and authentic. But little by little, there crept into my life the dust and grit of the journey. Details, lower-level demands, all kinds of cross-currents, nothing momentous, nothing overwhelming, nothing flagrant, just wear and tear. If there had been some direct challenge, a clear-cut issue, I would have fought it to the end and beyond. In the quietness of this place, surrounded by the all-pervading presence of God, my heart whispers, keep fresh before me the moments of my high resolve, that in fair weather or foul, in good times or in tempest, in the days when the darkness and the foe are nameless or familiar, I may not forget that to which my life is committed. Keep fresh before me the moments of my high resolve.
I
Let us put hands upon hearts. Feel the warm connection. Let love in this moment flow. Say to yourself silently, I will love myself. I will love others. And that love will heal the world. At this time, we share the joys and sorrows of this congregation. We send loving thoughts to Dave Spearman, who has dislocated his shoulder twice in the last 2 weeks and is now resting at home. Reach out if you wish to offer support to David and Jackie via emails or phone calls. I invite you to say the names of people who you are holding in your heart this morning. Bring them into this sacred space now. As humans have gathered for millennia, so we gather on this day to gently surrender to something beyond ourselves, to humbly acknowledge our mistakes, to ask forgiveness, to seek hope and renewal, to honor the earth that supports and sustains life, to remember that all beings are inextricably and mysteriously connected, and to feel that connection. Now we still our bodies and we still our minds. We take in a big breath. We exhale. We relax into this space that our intentions make sacred. We enter into the wise silence.
Good morning. My name is Letta Wu. I'm one of the co-chairs, along with Kay Johnson. Kay's hiding. Oh, you're behind the pillar. Right? Is she over there? Oh, okay, good. Along with Kay Johnson, who's hiding from me, of this year's stewardship campaign and pledge drive. Your pledge, which is a forecast of your financial contribution to UUCA in 2020, allows us to plan how we will continue the mission of UUCA. We are a community of faith, supporting each other's spiritual journey so that together we can act for social justice. Part of my journey started here by showing up to receive welcome and refuge. I had never experienced a faith community like this, but was surprised to discover a deeper connection to myself that emerged when I was more fully engaged with all of you. For me, that looked like dancing with the new UU Moves movement choir and volunteering with inspiring and incredible people. I need to give a shout out to the UUCA staff, the office volunteers, the stewardship team, and the religious education team, and many others. I also want to mention the Big Bethel Saturday School Academy in downtown Atlanta, which seeks to empower children and youth, especially those that are at risk and underserved. I learned about this opportunity as well as about the legacy of UUCA activism in community educational opportunities through longtime UUCA member Beth Davis. My time at Big Bethel AME with other UUCA volunteers alongside our interfaith partners in the community has allowed me to experience both positive change and possibility, as well as just how daunting and challenging the work is to create a more just and loving world. But what gives me hope is that we don't have to do it alone. And we have so many guides to help us if we choose to engage and to both share our stories and listen to others. Most of all in this moment, I want to express my gratitude to the UUCA community in helping me on my spiritual journey and to know myself better. I have felt the courage to reach out and do what I can to act for social justice, knowing that we are in this community of faith together. Thank you to everyone who has already pledged. We are currently over 80% of our pledge goal of $700,000. So yay! We are excited because there's a good chance we will not only meet that goal, but will exceed the goal amount. For those who haven't pledged yet, I hope that you will join me and others in helping to continue the important mission of UUCA by pledging in this year's stewardship campaign. To make a pledge, you can go online to uuca.org. There's a link at the top you can click. Paper pledges are also available in the social hall. You can come to the pledge table. You can come by and say hello to both Kay, who's still hiding from me, and me, and we'd love to talk to you. And now, this morning's offering will be given and gratefully received.
Keep your lamps trimmed and burning, keep your lamps Keep your lamps trimmed and burning, keep your lamps trimmed and burning, keep your lamps trimmed and burning. The time is drawing now.
It has been a joy these last 6 weeks or so to seek and find people to come to our pulpit and share their stories, their testimonials for our stewardship drive, because it has allowed you to meet people in our congregation who bless us with a certain kind of power that I call holy power. This is what I think Letta Wu and so many other of our speakers, our stewardship testimonials, have shown us. Letta blesses us with her story, inspires us with her story of how she understood herself as someone totally different after coming here, made a career change, is still going through this transformation, and the ways that she inspires all of us on staff, volunteers, to do our best work with joy, just joy. So it's a blessing for Letta to share her story with you so you could get to know her a little bit better. And you are a blessing in the way you offer your holy power, little by little, to contribute to this gift, spreading more love, more power, more justice in this community, in this world that desperately needs it. Blessings on this gift. May it go far and wide, spread joy and love in all the dark corners.
And now please join me in the dedication of the offering, which is found in your order of service. To the work of this congregation, which is weaving a tapestry of love and action we call community, we dedicate our lives, and these are offerings.
Some of you may know I struggle a little bit with sermon titles sometimes, and I struggled with this sermon title. I had originally named this sermon after Public Enemy's 1990 record, Fear of a Black Planet. I was going to title the sermon Fear of a Black Unitarian Universalism, until a friend pointed out to me that title may somehow indicate to you that Black Unitarian Universalism does not already exist. And it definitely does. Praise be, Black Unitarian Universalism is thriving these days more than possibly any other time in the history of this faith tradition. The clip you just saw was taken just last week at the inaugural Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism Harper Jordan Memorial Symposium, a symposium that responds to the longing of many Black Unitarian Universalists to more fully understand where they have been, where they are now, and how they hope to live out their Unitarian Universalism as Black people. The 4-day gathering held in Minneapolis, Minnesota just last weekend offered educational plenaries, spiritual grounding that spoke directly to the learning, and was chock full of networking and community building opportunities. The symposium explored an articulation of Unitarian Universalism that is unapologetically Black and proceeds from co-creation and co-development, such that we might proclaim and clarify a vision for Black Unitarian Universalism. This symposium, open to everyone, was named for Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, an abolitionist, a suffragist, a writer, and a Unitarian, and Reverend Joseph Jordan, the first Black ordained Universalist. I have watched some of the plenaries, and you can too. It's available if you Google the Black Lives UU, blue.org will get you there. And I decided now would be the right time to let you in on one of my visions of ministry for Unitarian Universalism and specifically for the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Atlanta. Now, it probably won't be a secret to you because it is already articulated and proclaimed within this congregation's Aramac resolution from a few years ago, that anti-racism, anti-oppression, multiculturalism resolution. But regardless of that, it needs to be articulated and shared in as many ways as possible from this pulpit and beyond. In a world that seeks to divide us, we know there is another way. We know this. In a city that has burned and struggled and been redlined, bifurcated, that has innovated, has come together and broken apart, we can be part of Atlanta's healing and hope. Heaven bent on an Atlanta that can take its shattered history and piece together a beautifully mosaicked and multiracial future. So the vision is for UUCA to become a fully multiracial, multicultural, queer-loving, multi-belief congregation that is working on itself, that is working harder to love Christians and atheists who all come here to worship, that can make space for humanists and agnostics, that can offer a place for pagan ritual and goddess-centered faith, that can hold it all, not perfectly, but artfully, flexibly, and beautifully. That is the vision. And I welcome this challenge in this time and place, in our wilderness experience, as we move to our permanent next location. We already have figured out we don't need a building to be the salvific worshiping community that can transform and heal Atlanta. In some ways, we are released, we are liberated from some trappings. I mean, I talk to colleagues who have to spend a lot of time and money upkeeping their ancient, beautiful church structures. So there's various types of, church envy to have, and I don't have that. Now, I want to tell you, this is by no means the most challenging moment in the life of this congregation. In fact, it is not even close. So I want to talk about the history of this congregation, and I want to trouble a little bit of the story we have about its history, if you'll journey back with me. The early UU Church of Atlanta struggled mightily with outside attacks of communism and also inside ruptures around integration. In the mid to late 1940s, as the church was wrestling with public insinuations of communist complicity, a real shift in long-standing and fundamental Southern segregation policies was already underway. Changes to the Southern Jim Crow traditions were afoot in various legal locations. And in 1947, the Massachusetts-born Universalist minister, Reverend Isaiah Domas, in words and actions, he reflected this change that was going on in the South. Upon arriving in Atlanta, Domas took a one-day-a-week job at Atlanta University, a predominantly black college. Reverend Domas also reserved the right to meet with whomever he chose in his home, and that company included his colleague, Dr. Thomas Baker Jones, a black Unitarian from Ohio. Reverend Domas considered it a heart-sickening duty to discourage Dr. Jones from attending Sunday services at his Unitarian congregation of Atlanta. And so he didn't. Dr. Jones did attend a Sunday service in November 1947. Reverend Domas recounted the event. He was seated without incident, even taking the offering, but the matter was hardly allowed to rest there. An ultra-race-conscious minority promptly rushed to the telephone and served notice to two members of the board with whom they were connected with that I should be fired immediately. Reverend Domas's daughter described what happened next as seen from the parsonage located next to the church on West Peachtree Street. She wrote, "When the Ku Klux Klan threatened our family in the fall of 1947, I was too young to be told and too short to look out the high windows. If I saw anything alarming, it was the odd way my parents stared at the street. My mother stood on one side of a closed drape, my father on the other. Each lifted just enough cloth to let in a sharp slice of Georgia sunlight. On West Peachtree Street, 2 floors below, a convoy of battered cars and rusty pickup trucks stretched from 3rd Street to Ponce de Leon. Each was full of Klansmen in full white robes, tilting back their pointed hoods to hunt for motion beyond our drapes. Several weeks later, the church voted to exclude black people from all church functions. The local newspaper reported the news with an article entitled, 'Wallaceites Church Votes Negro Ban.' Reverend Domas offered his resignation to the Board of Trustees, and the church subsequently voted to accept his resignation by a vote of 33 to 32. So he only ended up serving for 1 year. It was a small congregation at that point. At its May 1948 meeting, the Unitarian Ministers Association responded to these actions taken by the church by refusing to send any future candidates to Atlanta until the church reversed its segregationist policy. At the October 1950 meeting of the Unitarian Association Board of Directors, a recommendation was made and accepted that both the Unitarian Church of America and the Universalist Church of America and the American UU Association withdraw support from the Atlanta congregation. In September 1951, the American Unitarian Association sold the church building on West Peachtree Street, and the church was officially disbanded. Now, following the sale of the church building and the disbanding of that original congregation, the Universalist Church of America and the AUA coordinated efforts to raise a new liberal church in Atlanta. Reverend Glenn Canfield was dispatched to the city early in '52. He successfully regrouped several former members and attracted new members and recharted what became the United Liberal Church. Now raise your hand if you've heard of the United Liberal Church in Atlanta. So some of you are familiar with this time, and we do have a couple of members who have been members since it was called that. In 1966, the church changed its name to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Atlanta, UUCA. In a newspaper article in the Atlanta Constitution on May 5th, 1952, it was noted that Reverend Canfield brought to Atlanta a lively sermon style that was characterized by a 2-hour sermon and included a discussion session. I only included this detail for comparative purposes. There's no other reason. Just so you know, not a threat, just awareness. Religious services were conducted those days at the Briarcliff Hotel. While services were held at the Briarcliff Hotel, Reverend Canfield recalled that he had a discussion with the hotel manager regarding people entering the hotel for the worship services. Adults entered the meeting room directly from the street, but children entered through the main lobby. Since services were integrated, black children were entering the hotel via the main lobby, And although the hotel manager was mildly sympathetic, he indicated that the hotel was a public place and he would lose his job if anyone saw black children going through the main entrance. And so Reverend Canfield and others worked diligently to find an alternative meeting space where they could hold integrated worship services. In October 1952, the Unitarians and the Universalists began negotiations with the Latter-day Saints to share their worship space at 605 Boulevard Northeast in this building. Reverend Canfield reported that the liberals and the Mormons have reached complete and amicable agreement, at least on some things. So you can see that our congregation's history is not as clear-cut as being, quote, the first integrated church in Atlanta. Even that title is complex, circuitous. It is fraught with fissures and fractures. Now, what is being explored and accomplished today in the wider world of Unitarian Universalism offers us a fresh path, a heartening way of expressing Unitarian Universalism. Now, I share the concern of a congregant leader in our congregation, a black UU, who asked a group of us, when people say they want our congregation to be diverse, do they mean it? What if we had more black staff than white? What if we had more black members or members of color than white members here? Is that what people mean when they speak of diversity? Or do they have a threshold, a limit for their own comfort? It's an interesting question. Look, I know I am white. Seriously, I think it's important to know that. I have a spiritual discipline of staying aware of my privilege, keeping conversation partners who keep me aware of my whiteness and my privilege. Now, I was raised in a neighborhood and in a school just outside of Chicago where white kids were not the majority. And I am grateful to have grown up code switching. And I am still connected with many of those early childhood friendships that I had. It is still a spiritual discipline for me to try to place myself in situations where I am the racial minority, to remember the gift of that feeling, since these days I sadly lack that experience in my life, to my and my family's detriment. And as a minister, I have to tell you, I wrestle each week with the question, to whom am I preaching? Because I dream of that church Howard Thurman started in San Francisco that is fully multiracial, multicultural, that can hold all of those complexities of belief and identity. But Howard Thurman had some things to say about religion, about Christianity as he understood it. In 1976, Thurman wrote, "I can count on the fingers of one hand the number of times that I have heard a sermon on the meaning of religion to the man who stands with his back against the wall. It is urgent that my meaning be crystal clear. The masses of people live with their backs constantly against the wall. They are the poor, the disinherited, the dispossessed. What does our religion say to them? The issue is not what it counsels for them to do for others whose needs may be greater, but what religion offers to meet their own needs. The search for an answer to this question is perhaps the most important religious question of modern life." This was the very, I think, early work of liberation theology he was doing in his book, Jesus and the Disinherited. And I would make this claim. This is also true for Unitarian Universalism until recent years. And I believe Thurman speaks to all of us now in our days of rage in 2019, when he said, "During the early days of the war, I noticed a definite rise in rudeness, an overt expression of color prejudice, especially in trains and other public places. It was very simple. Hatred could be brought out into the open, given a formal dignity and a place of respectability. But for the most part, we are not vocal about our hatred. Hating is something of which to be ashamed, unless it provides for us a form of validation and prestige. If either is provided, then the amoral character of the hatred is transformed into active violence. And friends, we are here in 2019. Hatred has been given validation and prestige. The person who represents our nation to the world wields hatred as a weapon. And this calls for love that is more powerful, more clear, more disciplined, and more radical in its expression. Hatred cannot be defined, Thurman said. It can only be described. In the first place, hatred often begins in a situation in which there is contact without fellowship, contact that is devoid of any of the primary overtures of warmth and fellow feeling and genuineness. Of course, it is easy to have fellowship on your own terms and to repudiate it if your terms are not acceptable, Howard Thurman wrote. And then, in 1976, Howard Thurman wrote about the insidious effects of social media in our internet communications. He didn't really, but I mean, how could he? But he did. Listen. It is clear that so much of modern life is so impersonal that there is always the opportunity for the seeds of hatred to grow unmolested. Where there are contacts devoid of genuine fellowship, such actions stand in immediate candidacy for hatred. Thurman says, unsympathetic understanding is the characteristic attitude governing the relation between the weak and the strong. Thurman said when the Southern, and he, by the way, I forgot to tell you, was Atlanta-based. He did for a long time. He taught at Spelman and Morehouse. When the Southern white says, I understand the Negro, what he really means is that he has a knowledge of the Negro within the limitations of the boundaries which the white man has set up. The kind of black person he understands has no existence except in his own mind. This unsympathetic understanding, that kind of hatred is paternalistic. It is complex and insidious. And those with privilege must be on guard for it at all times. Hatred in the mind and the spirit of the disinherited. So now Howard Thurman speaks to the disinherited. There's hatred there too, and it is born out of a great bitterness, a bitterness that is made possible by sustained resentment, which is bottled up until it distills an essence of vitality. Thus, hatred can become a device by which a person seeks to protect himself against moral disintegration. And so he does to other human beings what he could not ordinarily do to them without losing his self-respect. This is an aspect of hatred that has almost universal application during a time of national crisis. Howard Thurman said this, and what I'm saying is that we are in a time of national crisis now. We are in a war of extreme rhetoric for now, division, and yes, hatred across our country and in our communities. Now, Thurman wrote to the disinherited, to those with their backs against the wall, to love people, told them to love people the way Jesus loved the tax collector, to love people, even enemies, while not condoning their way of life. It is not easy. It is a discipline and an overall technique to love one's enemy. Once the mutual discovery has been made that the privileged is a human, and the underprivileged is a human, then these must be reconciled through the discipline of universal human experience. That we are each exceptional and We can each prove stereotypes. Both of those are true. We all have a lot of work to do here. The work of the privileged is to lift up the underprivileged. And for those without power, the work is to love each other and themselves and to define your own identity, your own faith outside of the privileged person's understanding, outside of that structure. I believe there is salvation in the religious community that can hold all of these identities together, particularly now when we are being divided in this constant war of words. This is the moment when our time for mutual respect and mutual understanding can save us, can save all of us. Unitarian Universalism should be the most rampant, largest religion across our country. It's time. If it has not come before, it sure has come now. This is what these mystic activists have all had to say to us over these past 6 weeks that we've been in this mystic activism series. We've heard from Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, from Dolly Parton, from the poet Hafiz, from the writer Gabriel Garcia Marquez, from Toni Morrison, and now from Howard Thurman. They are all telling us the same thing in their mysticism and their activism. They want us to see God in everyone and within, in ourselves, or to see the divine in everyone and in ourselves, to see ourselves with greater truth, all the ways we are privileged and all the ways we are not, to be honest and compassionate with ourselves when it is needed, and to be honest and harsh with ourselves when that is needed. We need not fear a Black Unitarian Universalism. It is already here, and it is beautiful. We can simply praise God or praise whatever it is you praise, that you are alive in this time to witness to this cultural expression of liberal faith, breathing life into the future of this faith community, and inspiring a love that demands our action and our unending gratitude, our gratitude. So we can look to all the leaders of color, people of color in our congregation and support them, honor their spiritual expressions joyfully. And I'm talking to everyone. Everyone can do this for each other. Free of judgment, joyfully free of judgment, with an ethic of gratitude. This is how you will always, always keep fresh before you your moments of high resolve. May it be so. Amen.
Will you lift your bodies as you are able, your spirits all, and your voices all, and join in singing this stately anthem of the African American community. Lift every voice and sing number 149.
Harmonies of
won't you please join hands for our benediction? Whether you have been a part of this community since it was the United Liberal Church of Atlanta, or this is your first day here, I hope you feel you belong here. I hope you have found a word that inspires you and brings you hope here. The hand you are holding is the hand of someone who has felt like an outsider. The hand you are holding is the hand of someone who has also been an insider and has felt what it's like to be completely comfortable. Someone who has been privileged and oppressed. This hand contains multitudes of experience. And this is the hand you are beholden to remember, to keep fresh before you your moment of high resolve, that you will work for a better life, a better community for this person whose hand you are holding, that you will encourage and lift up that person, and in doing so, you will be encouraged and you will be lifted. This is the work we are called to. Let us begin the work. Go forth, go in peace, go in love. Amen.